right. Thank you so much for your time today, Kay. For those of you who don't know who are watching, Kay Kotan, you're just like a powerhouse in terms of resourcing churches, established churches, new churches, church planting. You've been in the development world for a while, and I'm so grateful for you. I've loved working with you on every single project, and so when it came time for Path One to figure out a definition for our glossary of what a cooperative parish is, I knew I had to go to you for that answer. So thank you for being with us, Kay. And can you just dive right in and tell us, what is a cooperative parish? What might be 4 key shifts that need to happen for this to be viable?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, first of all, Rachel, for allowing me to share. This is one place where I feel like as either a developer or a district superintendent, that we can begin to think about this a little differently. I mean, it's been around for quite some time, but we've kind of used it in an old model. So if we think about how are some ways that we can begin to think about this with some fresh eyes, if you will, and isn't this the time and the season for fresh eyes? So many times we have done cooperative parishes, almost like 2-point, 3-point, 4-point charges. And we've done this from a standpoint of filling appointments, putting pieces together to create a full-time appointment or a half-time appointment. So the first shift would be from just fulfilling appointments to innovative missional strategies. All right, so we have to think about it from a mission point standpoint, a mission field standpoint, instead of just how do we bundle some things together for an appointment purpose. Okay, so that would be the first shift. The second shift that I think is helpful is, rather than seeing cooperative parishes as a top-down approach, that it really needs to come from a grassroots. So what I mean by that is, how are the congregations that are being thought of to come together to form a cooperative parish, how are they coming together to say, we really want to do this, as opposed to it being imposed on them? Because we know how that goes, right? And so I think sometimes that has to start with, why is this important, right? And then continuous learning communities. So how are we putting those folks together in learning communities and begin to think about missional focus and sharing of resources and have a shared vision? Because if everyone has a different vision, how are we going to come together and do anything cooperatively, right? Because that's the whole idea, is cooperatively, instead of we're just coming together to share a pastor, right? So the second would be a shift from the top down to a grassroots movement. Okay. So the third one would be, too often we put maybe not our A team, if you will, in places that we think of as cooperative parish or 2 or 3-point charges, right? So the third shift would be thinking, moving away from novice appointments and our C-level kind of leaders in these appointments to some of our top leaders in these appointments. And here's what I mean. If we believe that this is a strategic mission field, right? Because that's really what that's one of the whys we have to figure out, is why would we want to invest here? Because it's a strategic mission field. And if it's strategic, we need to be putting some of our best people there. But too often we put the same kind of people together instead of a blended mixture of gifts. And so one of the cooperative parishes that I recommend is, there was one particular town that had like 6 or 8 United Methodist churches in what we would consider a mid-sized town, not even city. And there had been, mergers in our United Methodist past that happened, but they really never merged together. And we ended up with all of these buildings with much smaller congregations. And so what if we were to really think about all 8 of those pastors being reappointed, And instead, we have a team of 3 go in. One of them being the visionary pastor, like that great communicator, and one that can cast a vision for something new to reach new people. The second one being someone that's a planter, so that community networker, that they're really out there working the community and reaching new people. And then with those shifts, the existing folks in those congregations are going to need some really good congregational care, and we're going to need to do some really good discipleship. So it's a 3-team approach: a visionary pastor, a planter type pastor, and then the congregational care and discipleship person. And so when we look at that model, most of the time, it's a significant savings to those churches when you look at this cooperative model, rather than 8 different pastors at these churches all trying to do something new, all trying to create something new, right? So that's the third shift.
I love
The
that.
fourth,
I'm going to jump into this really quickly because
please.
I love how you describe that and that team, not only because it's savings of money, but also it enables us to live into our connectional system even more, work together. And I've talked to a lot of pastors who've been appointed to small churches with, 10 or 15 people who feel so alone and so isolated. And every time I've mentioned this possible approach, they just light up and they're like, could I do that? I would love that. A team, and they would receive more self-care and help in their own parish setting. So love that idea. It's amazing. Okay. 3 shifts down, 1 to go. Where else do we have to?
Well, and Rachel, also, and this kind of leads into the next thing is, especially our younger generations have been taught in models of teaming. It's not kind of this solo approach. And so that's where they thrive as well. And we're all better on a team, when we're sharing gifts. So the fourth shift is actually moving from yours and mine to ours. It's that shift in thinking. I mean, we are a connection, but we so often don't function as though we're a connection. So think about the shared overhead, not only real estate. Wow, we are so heavy in real estate, right? But think about resources on, instead of 8 bulletins, you have 1 bulletin. Instead of 8 administrative assistants, you have 1 or 2. Instead of 8 youth people, you have 1 or 2. You have the same with children. And so think about the gifts that you can have, and most of the time when you get into those size churches, it's a quarter-time person, or a half-time person, versus if it's a shared over a cooperative parish, then we're likely to be able to have someone full-time. So their full-time attention is on that ministry versus it being, a moonlighting position, because that's all that can be afforded. So this whole idea of collectively we can do more with our resources, our gifts, our talents, and our experiences. So that's kind of the fourth shift that I think when we're thinking about cooperative parishes for the future that we need to be thinking about.
That's great. So what are 4 key considerations that we should keep in mind as DSs or developers are trying to implement this in their local context?
Exactly. So first of all, I think we have to think about this from, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but a strategic mission field, right? So what is the area that we feel like we're missing? I'll call it market share, and I know that's more of a secular term, but we just don't have a representation of the population that we should in our churches, right? And that's almost anywhere. But there's some that are more than others, and so sometimes this is a county-wide kind of approach, or maybe it's a school district kind of approach. I mean, it depending on density population, it could be all different kinds of sizes. And it also depends on how far people are willing to travel. And sometimes that's in time and sometimes that's in distance, right? And so we have to keep that in mind. But the key consideration is, let's not do this for just the sake of doing a cooperative parish. We consider it a strategic mission field, and therefore we're willing to do the investment to make this a fruitful cooperative parish, which means we're going to have that slow on-ramp and do the learning community, do the visioning together, talk about the why first, instead of this top-down approach of saying, okay, as the DS or whatever, this is what's going to happen, or developer or whatever, that's going to happen. So that's one of the first key considerations. The second one is, I think if we're going to do this, it has to be a commitment from our district superintendent, from our cabinet, because this means that there may need to be some funding considerations. And we also need to make this a priority in our appointments. Oftentimes, our smaller churches are some of the last to receive appointments. But if we're going to have some of our top leaders, a visionary, a planter type, then it's going to have to be higher on the list in the appointment order if this is going to be a successful piece. You can't, whoever's left at the end, we're just going to go try to make it happen. That's not going to work, because you need some special giftedness and blend of giftedness for this to work. So it takes a commitment. And I think the other thing is the why has to be missional focused. So in other words, it can't be for the sake of saving a building.
Amen.
So often we do these kinds of things because, oh, we've got to empty a building, or we do this because we're trying to fill an appointment for a full-time person or something like that. So it can't be for the sake of another strategy or another need. It has to be for the sake of reaching new people, because I think those are the only reasons that get blessed, right?
Yeah.
So I think the fourth key consideration, and this is the one I'm really most excited about, is, and I don't know how many times I've said this, Rachel, in the last 5 months, is Albert Einstein's quote, in every crisis, there's an opportunity. And COVID has created an opportunity for cooperative parishes. And here's what I mean by that. As churches are shifting back into in-person, some of our smaller churches are ones that are struggling most with doing in-person and on-site both, because of the limited resources, right? Mm-hmm. So if we were to think about a cooperative parish when it comes to an online presence, instead of every church trying to create an online presence, what if we had a cooperative parish outlook to online presence, and be sharing those resources, and then we could be dispatching those once they want to, or if they want to, become involved in an on-site kind of an experience. But what collective resources and wisdom and experience and talent we could have if we think about a cooperative parish from, an online perspective.
I love that. And it goes back to like having more resources as you do this cooperative, whereas a lot of churches are like, I can't afford a tech person right now. If you had 3 pastors instead of 8, you could have someone that was running all of the tech side of an online service to minister to more people who won't be able to come back or might choose not to come back in person in the near future. So I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, it's been in the Book of Discipline for a very, very long time. It's paragraph 206, if anybody wants to go look it up. But it's been there for so long that it's one of those things that I think we've kind of forgotten about. But it's great because of who we are and the connection that we are as United Methodist. But I also think with a fresh lens, a fresh set of eyes, that we can reimagine cooperative parishes, especially as we are in COVID and post-COVID, whatever that's going to look like, that there's some unique opportunities that are not for the sake of survival, but for the sake of kingdom fruitfulness, and also the best stewards of our resources as well. It's a unique opportunity.
That's amazing. Well, thank you, Kay, for your time, for your definition. And I'm excited. I'm hopeful that more annual conferences consider this moving forward, because you're right.
Absolutely.
This is
I
an
hope so
opportunity.
too. Thank you, Rachel.
All right. Take care.
All right.